morning, everybody, and welcome to Access. I am so glad you're here today. You need to understand this. There's so many places you could be on a Sunday, but you're here, so God bless you for being here. I'm honored you're here. If we haven't met, my name is Jason, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm pumped you're here. We're in week 2 of a series called Flourish, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, let me show you an important number that matters to me a whole lot. It's this number 70, and the reason this matters to me so much is today is 70 days until Easter, 10 weeks until Easter Sunday, April 21st. Easter is the biggest day of the year. It's the Super Bowl Sunday for churches, but the reason is it's the day that we celebrate the fact that death no longer has the final word, but because of Jesus, death is defeated. We celebrate that Jesus rose again. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do. Over the next 10 weeks, I'm going to challenge you every single week to do something intentional, and those things that we do are intentional because people matter to Jesus, and if people matter to Jesus, they better matter to us. And so we're going to do some stuff together over the next 10 weeks to get progressively more and more aggressive about reaching people for Jesus as a church. Today's is really simple. This week, I'm just asking you to do one thing, and I'm asking for the next 7 days, now through next Sunday, would you commit a few minutes every day to just asking God to do a miracle for our church and to open a building for our Lakeland campus and for our Brandon campus? Sometimes people ask me things like, Jason, does Access want a building? I'm like, you want a punch in the throat? Of course we want a building. Like, we've been working on it forever. But we're also at the point where we've just committed to doing the right thing, never going into crazy debt that straps us down, never making a dumb decision just because we want something. And so we're just asking God to do a miracle and do what only He can do. And I believe He can. Here's the reason it matters. We just know that having a building will increase visibility and more people, we believe, will come, experience life change through Christ here at Access. And so would you just join me in praying for that? And so for the next 7 days, we're praying for a building. Got it? It's going to be a lot of fun. Today, I'm in part 2 of this series called Flourish that I'm excited about. And if you were here last week, I referenced something that I just want to make sure you know about. There's a book that messed my life up. It's a book called The Blessed Life. Now, last week, we gave copies away of it. We had a few. We gave them all away. They're all gone. I'd love for you to go on Amazon today. Go on right now, actually, and buy this book. It's called The Blessed Life by a guy named Robert Morris. This book messed my life up when it comes to finances. Now, last week we started a series on finances, but it felt like part 2 of a series that we actually started last February called Blessed Finances. The series are very different, but what I want you to understand is the principle of this book that God wants you to be blessed. God is a generous God who wants to bless His children, but not so that you can raise your standard of living, but instead so that you can raise your standard of giving. See, what I believe is that God blesses us so that we can bless others. His intention was that you and I would be conduits to which blessings could flow through. And so last week we gave them away. Grab one online this week, and I really do believe that God will use it to change your life. Now, in this series, we've defined the word flourish in this simple way. Flourish just means to break forth or to blossom. And if I could think about all the places in our lives that we would love to have a breakthrough or a break forth kind of moment, you might make a list that might include your health. It might include your relationships, your marriage, your friendships, your school. But I think all of us would put on the list our finances because, like, who wouldn't want a little bit more finances, right? I think about that scene in Fiddler on the Roof. Anybody seen Fiddler on the Roof? Where Tevye is like, if being rich is a curse, then smite me with it. You know, like, how many of you would just love that? And I really do believe that God wants to bless us in this way. And so we've been talking about what would it look like if we were to make the intentional decisions that God honors to bless us so that we can flourish in our finances. So last week I said that God blesses us to bless others. Today I want to wrestle with a different question. And this one's challenging. This one's going to get kind of all up in your business. And here is the question. What will you do with what God entrusts to you? What will you do with what God entrusts to you? They need to understand, last week we ended with this simple idea that God owns it all. David said in Psalm 24:1 that the earth is the Lord and everything in it. And what that means is that everything you have belongs to God. And so God entrusts some of it to us. Well, what are we going to do with what God entrusts to you? This is a huge question, and we're going to spend our time wrestling with it today. About 7 years ago, my wife and I, we saved up frequent flyer miles and we saved up money and we went on a dream vacation. We flew across the ocean and we spent about a week in 3 different countries. We spent several days in Barcelona, Spain. The end of the trip, we spent 3 days in Rome, Italy. Amazing, amazing time. Before we went, I had lots of friends tell me all the places to go and all the things to see, and more specifically, all the places to eat. And people said things like, when you're in Europe, you don't gain weight because you walk so much. And I'm like, you're about to watch this happen, son. And I just ate everything. I went on an eating tour of those countries. But one day, we took a day trip north of Barcelona, about a 3-hour drive north, into an area in southern France called Carcassonne. It was one of the most beautiful drives I've ever been on. We kind of hugged the Mediterranean coast. And it was fascinating how often the French countryside you would see up in these hills, these castles. And I have no idea, there's like nothing around it, but there was just a huge castle there. We made our way to the city of Carcassonne, which is a small city, and inside the city limits of modern-day Carcassonne is the ancient city of Carcassonne. It's the fortified city. It looks kind of like this. And Carcassonne was built over 2,000 years ago. It's this fortified city with massive walls. There's a moat around it. The truth is, when I see the Bud Light Dilly Dilly commercials, this is what I think of. You know what I'm talking about? To the pit of misery. And I don't know if a pastor should say that, but whatever, it's funny. And so this is what it looks like. And so we go and we spend a day touring and we get all kinds of information. They show us how they made things. They show us how they built the place. They showed us what living in a fortified city like this would look like. And then at the end of the tour, we met a guy who was dressed in this interesting outfit. And he introduces himself and he says, I live here. I've lived here for generations. And he told us his title. He wasn't the owner. He wasn't the president. He wasn't the CEO of Carcassonne. His title was unique. He was called the lead steward. The lead steward. It was an interesting title. I've never met anyone with the title lead steward before, but this was the first one. And he has this title, lead steward, and it's interesting because what it implies is this. He doesn't actually own the facility. He doesn't own the fortified city and all the places inside of it. He's just in charge of taking care of it. In fact, you could define steward in this way. A steward is someone who manages someone else's property. A steward manages something that doesn't belong to them. Now, last week we said this. There's basically two things that God invites all of us to do when it comes to our money. He invites us to tithe, and we said last week tithing is giving God the first 10%. Not 10%, the first 10%. It means before you know if there's going to be any surprises, any unexpected bills in the mail, you just know that you've made the decision to trust God because ultimately God is the one who blesses and provides anyways. But then the second thing that God invites us to do is to steward. And so the definition of stewardship would be, stewardship is managing someone else's property. And God invites all of us to steward what he's given to us. Now, this is the area that I see a lot of Christians mess up in. Many of you have even gone on the adventure with God where you've said, God, I'm going to tithe and put the first 10% into your work for your service. And so we tithe. But then we don't manage the rest of it. We don't steward the rest of it well. We buy into the lie that the rest of it is all for us, that all the extra is just for my consumption and to keep me happy, when the truth is God wants to bless you so that you can bless others. And so we buy into the lie that the rest is somehow in some way all for us. I would say it like this. If you're a tither but you don't manage the rest, you risk running the potential of missing out on the supernatural blessings of God. It would be no different than going out and spending a ton of money on an expensive bicycle, this amazing high-end road bike, but then making the decision to deflate the back tire. It's like you're never going to get the full benefit out of it. And I just see so many Christians who, in my opinion, that they get one right or they get the other right, but they don't get both right. And I really do believe that in the same way that God blesses us supernaturally when we tithe, he also blesses us supernaturally when we manage his resources well. And the reason I say his is it's all his. Like if you were to pull up your bank account right now and look at it, whatever amount is in your account, whether it's $5 or $55 million is irrelevant. It's all his. And you may think that you earned it. You may think that you worked really hard for it. And you may think that you had the ideas or you had the sleepless nights. And at the end of the day, you did the work, but who gave you the energy? And who was the one who gave you the ideas and the abilities and put you uniquely in the position he placed you in? None of it was you. It's all God, and therefore all of it is God's. Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and everything, the fullness thereof, all of it is his. It's all his, and he invites you to steward or to manage the rest of it. Now, so many of us, we just don't understand this. We just have kind of a wrong mentality of this. So today what I want to do is I want to spend some time looking at a really interesting story in the book of Matthew chapter 25. And hidden in the middle of the story, there's this little 6-word phrase. And we're going to really spend some time talking about this. But the phrase is a phrase that you probably heard if you grew up going to church, if you grew up going to Sunday school or children's church, or grew up listening to sermons of any kind. You probably heard this phrase thrown around. It's a very popular Christian phrase. And here it is. The phrase is 6 words. Good, well done, good and faithful servant. 6 words. Good, what is it? Well done. Lost my train of thought. Well done, good and faithful servant. 6 words. Now, I always heard this phrase thrown around in church as, this is what you want to hear God say to you when you get to heaven, right? So you got to do things. You got to manage your morality. You got to make right choices, all important things. You got to have right relationships, honor your mother and father, and do all these things. And when you do all these things, when you get to heaven, God will say, well done, good and faithful servant. 6 words, right? But I want to show you that that phrase is only in the Bible 2 times, and it's in the story we're going to read, and it has nothing to do with your choices or your morality or following Jesus. It really has to do something with something far more simple, and yet so many of us, we mess this up. Matthew 25, verse 14 says this. This is Jesus talking, and he says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like," we should pause there for a moment, because Jesus gives us a picture of what heaven is going to be like. And I love the picture that Jesus paints of heaven. Like, if anyone would know what heaven is going to be like, it's Jesus. I mean, he's the one from heaven. Like, he gets what heaven is. And he says the kingdom of heaven is like, and he paints a picture for us. And the reason it's important is, I think as followers of Jesus, our mission is to bring heaven to earth, to make earth a lot more like heaven. And that elicits this beautiful picture, and it's also a challenging picture, because what that means is if you're a follower of Jesus, earth, where we are, is the farthest you'll ever feel from heaven. But conversely, if you're not a follower of Jesus, earth is the closest heaven will ever be to you. It's a big deal. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like, and he invites us to get a picture so that we can bring it to earth. The kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his own servants together. And I want you to listen to this. He delivered his goods to them. Now whose are the goods that he's delivering? They're his. He doesn't bring them back something that was theirs. He doesn't bring them back something that he had borrowed from them. It's not like that. It's not like he borrowed a sweatshirt and brought it back to them and said, here's your sweatshirt back, I washed it for you. No. He brings and gives to them his own goods, his own money, you're going to see. Verse 15. He says, and to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. Now let's pause here for just a moment. Maybe you've read this before and you thought talent is giftings. You think of talents like the ability to sing or to dance or to write or to act or to speak well in front of people. And the reality is those are important things, but that's not what the story is talking about. Talent is a unit of money. We'll talk about it in just a moment. But he gives to one 5 talents, 5 units of money, to another 2 units of money, and to another one just 1. And then there's this phrase, each according to his own ability. Now this word ability, again, isn't talking about giftings or talents like dancing or singing or acting. Instead, abilities refers to the way that you manage your money, to each according to their own ability or to the way that they were able to steward what they have. So it goes on to say this, and immediately he goes on his journey, verse 16. Then he who had received the 5 talents went, and he went to work. He traded with them, and he made another 5 talents. So he doubled the investment that was given to him. Verse 17, and likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. So both guys, the 5 and the 2 talent guy, they doubled what was given to them. Verse 18, but, important word here, but he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid. And look at this, what did he hide? His Lord's money. It's not his. He didn't go hide his own money. If you want to get rid of your money and do dumb things with it, that's up to you. But this money didn't belong to him. It belonged to his Lord. It was from his boss's bank account, not from his bank account. And he gets the 1 and he goes and he hides this amount of money. Verse 19, it says, after a long time, the Lord of those servants came and he just settled accounts with them. And just a quick side note, I just believe there's going to be a day when you stand before God and you have to account for, you have to settle the accounts for the way that you handled all of God's resources that he entrusted to you. Verse 20 says, so he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 others talents with him, saying, and just imagine he's excited, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look at this word, look, I have gained 5 more talents beside them. I doubled what you gave me. Verse 21 is fascinating because here is that 6-word phrase. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. Here's that phrase. Let me take a time out here and ask this question. Where is that phrase that you've maybe heard growing up in church, well done, good and faithful servant? What is that phrase connected to obedience in? Money. It's not connected to your morality. It's not connected to the way that you treat intimacy. It's not connected to your thought life. It's not connected to the way that you follow Jesus well or lead other people to him. All those things are important. I hope you do really good in those things. But this phrase that we've thrown around forever, well done, good and faithful servant, has nothing to do with all of those ancillary issues. It has to do exclusively with how you handle the resources that you were entrusted with. How do you handle the money that is God's, that God allows you to keep in your bank account? He says, well done, good and faithful servant. He says, you were faithful over a few things, so I will make you ruler over many things. This is such an important deal. He says, you were good with what you had, so I'm going to give you more. Remember, God blesses us to bless others. He was faithful with what he had, so the Lord, his master, gives him more. And he says, enter into the joy of your Lord. Now, I love this word joy. After the first service, I had a lady come up to me just a few minutes ago, and she said to me, she goes, Jason, the thing that stuck out to me the most is I've always been a giver, but joy was always somehow disconnected from it for me. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, I always gave, but I always thought, what more could I do for myself with that money? She went on to tell me that she had just received some large inheritance some time ago, and she's been holding back giving to God, tithing on it, because she thinks, man, what all can I do for me with this? And what she realized is that God invites us to give, to bring back to him what is his, and the result is to enter into joy. That giving and joy somehow live parallel with each other. She says, enter into the joy of your Lord. Verse 22, he also who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. Check me out. I doubled what you gave me. And then again, the 6-word phrase, verse 23, his Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You managed your money well. You did good. You managed your money well. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Now, I want you to notice something before we jump to the person who only had 1. One was given 5 talents. One was given 2. The Lord, the master, said to both of them the 6 words, well done, good and faithful servant. What it implies is the amount is kind of irrelevant. To the person who was given much, he doubled it. To the person who was given less, he doubled it. Both received the accolades, well done, good and faithful servant. What it implies is that you are to be responsible and you are to be faithful with whatever God has entrusted to you. I could put it to you like this. If you made $10 million and you were to bring a tithe of $1 million to the Lord and you brought $500,000, half of your tithe, the amount is staggering. $500,000 of a gift would change the trajectory of any church. It's a huge amount of money, right? But you didn't give all that you were entitled or enabled to give. But what about the person who comes in and they're honestly struggling? Honestly, it's a widow barely making ends meet, and so her tithe is $50. She made $500 this month, and she tithes $50 on it, but instead she goes over and above and gives $60 or $65. To which one would God say, well done, good and faithful servant? Has nothing to do with the amount. It has to do with obedience and the posture of the heart. So to one he gives 5, well done, good and faithful servant. To one he gives 2, well done, good and faithful servant. Then he says the phrase again, enter into the joy of your Lord. There's that joy phrase again. And then it's like if this were a scene, the music changes. It's like it goes from this happy, exciting music, all of a sudden there's this low, bassy hum that kind of fills the air. Verse 24 says this, then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And this is important. He says, and I was what? Afraid. I was afraid. Fear causes us to miss out on the blessing of God. He said, what does that mean? It means fear and generosity just cannot coexist. That they just cannot, because a person who is fearful will hold on tightly to everything that they have. A fearful person doesn't understand the principle of ownership. You see, what you understand when you understand that God owns everything is it changes. You no longer have to live in fear. You say, what does it mean? Well, let me paint a picture for you. Imagine that you rent an apartment. You're not the owner. You just rent the apartment. If a pipe in the wall breaks and it does $5,000 of damage to the house, but you're the renter, who pays for the fixing of the pipe? The owner, right? It's not your problem, right? If you own the house and something breaks, it's your problem. When you don't own the house and something breaks, it's someone else's problem. In the same way, when you understand that God owns everything, you're not the owner anymore. God owns it. what you begin to understand is that anything that happens is going to be God's responsibility. You're going to be faithful to your part, and God's going to be the owner, and he's going to take care of the rest of it. It causes you to live a stress-free life. Like, how amazing would it be if you could live stress-free financially? How different, how open-handed would you live? Statistically, 55% of Americans who earn less than $100,000 a year in combined household income, 55% live paycheck to paycheck. Let's talk about fear. Right? I read a report that said the average American family spent 102.5% of their income last year. That meant that last year, most Americans went into debt, at least 2.5% on what they earned last year. That causes fear. What would happen if you could get your finances aligned correctly? What would happen if you could become generous and faithful through tithing and also steward what God has given you really well? It changes things. Your heart no longer has to be gripped by fear and anxiety and greed and worry. You can start to live open-handed. And so he says, I was afraid, so I held on tightly because fear and generosity cannot coexist. Fear and risk cannot coexist. He says, I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there, you have what is yours. I brought you back what you gave me. You gave me one, but bam, here is your one back. Verse 26. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have at least deposited my money with the bankers. And at my coming, I would have received back my own with interest. I would have gotten a little something back if you would have just done the least amount required. Verse 28, he says, so take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. He was faithful. Give it to him. At least he'll bring me some return on it. Verse 29, for to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. This is the picture of what it means to be a steward over what God has given to you. So before we kind of conclude on this idea of stewardship, let's talk first of all about two principles. The first one is this. We need to celebrate the fact that I am not the owner. When it comes to your bank account, pull it up right now. Look at the amount in it. Guess what? You don't own any of it. It's going to cause you to not live in fear. It's going to cause you to think a little differently about it. But when you understand that you are not the owner, now there's some stewardship responsibility that comes along with it. Let's go back to the story for a moment. It says that each man was given different amounts of talents, 1 5, 1 2, and 1 1, right? Let's talk about what a talent was biblically. In the old time, 1 denarius was like the smallest form of currency, and this would equal about 1 day's worth of work. So take whatever you earn in a year and divide it by how many days you work. That's your day's worth of wage, okay? 1 denarii was this. 300 denarii was basically equivalent to a year's worth of wage. This is a huge amount of money. This is the reason why when Jesus is teaching one day and he's reclining at this table and this lady comes and breaks a jar of perfume and she pours it over his feet, and one of the disciples is like, man, what a waste. That was 300 denarii. It was worth an entire year's worth of wage. According to Google, the average American household makes $56,000-ish a year. Okay, that's that much. Imagine earning that much. Now, take the next step, okay? The master comes and he gives them a talent. A talent is 10,000 denarii. It's this insurmountable amount of money. 10,000 denarii is basically over 33 years worth of income. So let's use the $56,000 number. To one, he gives 1 talent, $56,000. To one, he gives 2, $112,000. But to one, he gives 5. Can't do the math that fast in my head. It's a lot of money, right? He gives these huge amounts of money. And what's fascinating to me is, even to the one that he gives 1, he gives 33 years of money for him to manage. What I love about following God is crazy generous. And even if you feel like your bank account's running a little low and there's not a lot, look at all that God has given you. Your health, your life, your vitality, your freedom. He's given you the ability to worship in a country where there's no restraints. Like, just look at all that God has given you. It's so much. It's insurmountable. It's more than a talent's worth if you really think about it in this way. It's a huge amount. And he gives it to you, and he invites you to manage or to steward really well. You just have to start with settling the ownership issue. In the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul reaches back and he quotes David from Psalms 24. He says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Everything. All of it. Your time, your energy, your resources, your relationships, your family, your spouse, your kids, all of it. Everything in it belongs to the Lord. He's the owner. You have to start with this. God owns everything, but he invites you, number two, the most important thing is this, to realize that you are the steward. You say, I'm the steward. It's not mine. It all belongs to God. So the result is I just get to steward what he has given to me. Now, we said a steward earlier, someone who manages the property for someone else. Let me say it to you like this. A steward has a responsibility, and the responsibility is to protect and expand the resources of the owner. In the same way to the story that we read a moment ago where it says the master came back to settle accounts, I believe there's going to be a day with God when you settle accounts with him. And he's going to ask the question, with what I gave you, how did you expand and protect? Expand and protect. Well, here's what it means to me. It means you start by honoring God with the first of your resources through tithing. It means you continue to work to create margin in your life. Get your finances in order so you can get your margins right so that you can be a generous person. Over and above tithing and bringing back to God what is his, you make the decision that God, if you'll continue to bless me, if you'll continue to pour out your blessings on me, I'll pour it out to the world around me. I could give you 1,000 stories of how this has worked out in my life and in my wife's life. But I'm just so careful to never manipulate you and turn this into some sort of cosmic slot machine where you give in order to pull the lever and hope that God somehow miraculously gives back. Here's what I do want to say to you though. What would it look like if all of us made this decision to see our money just a little differently? All of it belongs to God. It's all his. He's the owner and we're the stewards. I believe for some of you, you could finally sleep at night in peace. I believe some of you, the stranglehold, the anxiety that resources and money plays in your life could finally be put to rest. Because it's not yours. God invites you to steward it. Now, I always feel like I need to give this disclaimer. Look, we're not trying to get you to give to our church. I do believe that you should be a tither. I used to say things like, if you don't believe me, tithe to another church. That's dumb. If you don't believe me and if you don't trust this place, go to another church. That's fine. We really honestly don't need you to give. God has poured his blessings out as we've been stewards, as we've been faithful to manage the resources that God has given us and live within our margins. We've never manipulated you. We've never asked you to give over and above. We don't have bouncers at the back that are going to shake you down as you leave. We just don't play like that. We're just going to tell you, look, this is the great adventure of following Jesus. People say things like, Jesus, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you, and their bank accounts call them liars. What would it look like if you and I made this decision? Did you say, Jesus, I'm all in with you. You're the owner of everything. You allow me to manage so much. I'm going to be faithful. God blesses us so we can bless others. He pours out his blessing when we manage what he's given us really, really well. Will you bow your head and close your eyes with me? God, this message is one of those ones that's really, really challenging because it touches us in an area, a place where our nerves just sometimes feel raw. It's hard to trust you in the area of our money. God, for some of us, you're calling us to step out in faith, to join you on this great adventure of trusting you. And God, I really do believe that it starts when we really come to the understanding that it's all yours. You are the owner, not us. We just get to be stewards. So God, help us to begin to see our resources differently. Help us to trust that you're the owner, and in the same way that if something breaks in the house of someone who rents, it's the owner's responsibility. In our life, when things don't make sense, it's your responsibility, not ours. It causes us to let go of control. It causes us to let go of fear. It causes us to drop anxiety and to trust you. So God, we trust you. You're the owner. We're the stewards. If you bless us, our commitment is we will be a blessing conduit. You bless us and we'll take the resources you've given us to bless the world around us. And God, we thank you for it. We'll do it with joy. In Jesus' name.